stream, whether it is startup visa, but we haven't really spoken about the subjects we'll be talking about today. So today's session specifically will be related to express entry and PNP. Sonia, let's start with today's session, starting with the latest updates. There's been a lot of upheaval about what's happening in the express entry. Everybody's confused. People are thinking they can't make it through. So, what's happening? Just take
Yeah.
us through express entry first of all.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years. It's the first time in my career that I can't give proper full on advice based on trends. We're basing a
Right.
lot of things on assumptions right now because there's a lot of changes, a lot of new ways being introduced. Express Entry has always been one of the most used programs, whether it was before it was called Express Entry or even after during the pandemic, post-pandemic, it's probably been the most used program. But what they had said during the pandemic and leading up to now is they were going to change it up a little bit in terms of how they were going to do invites. So they were going to do category-based invites. Like, hey, they didn't say what the category is going to be until recently, but it was like assumptions were, you know what, it's probably based on your occupation or if you have a job offer or where your job offer in Canada is. So finally, they released more information a couple of weeks ago, and it was pretty much like 5 categories, like if you're French speaking, STEM, trade, certain occupation, healthcare occupations. If your job fell into this, and if you had at least 6 months of work experience in the last 3 years, so it's now not 1 year of work experience, it's 6 months of work experience. It can be in Canada, it can be overseas, it can be anywhere. In those particular jobs, they're going to do special draws and they're going to target those jobs. And they have already done one draw. So they did one last week. Which was for healthcare workers. So they've said they're going to do another draw this week for healthcare workers. And the score was much lower. Well, not much lower. I mean, we're looking at 476 draw where we were hovering around 480 or higher normally. So there's that crux of people that were so close and not being selected for so long. Now they're,
Right.
you know, if they were in the healthcare field, they were selected. There's only 500 invites that were released. And this week they have said on July 5th, which is tomorrow, they're going to do a STEM draw, which we are very excited to
Okay.
see what comes out of it, what the scores are going to be, and how it's going to be a game changer to figure out, hey, now how's everybody in the STEM occupations proceeding forward?
Well, that's going to be interesting because we are going the Australia way, if I can say so, that Canada
Yeah.
is going Australia way because that's where it used to happen like this, even though you
Mhm.
make the points, you're not selected. But give me an example. They said they will still do general draws, right? So
Mhm.
somebody, and mostly you will find in some cases, some people are scoring generally as general federal skilled worker. They used to score between 500, 512. Let's say somebody who studied in Canada or worked for
Mhm.
3, 4 years then came back to India. I keep getting asked these questions by people when they see our interactions and when we post Stephen and I
Yeah.
talking and stuff. They are so confused that what's going to happen to us because we are standing at 510 points and yet we are seeing STEM draws and healthcare draws and we're not getting our cutoffs. So are the
Yeah.
general draws still going to happen or it's just going to be STEM based draws and health specific healthcare draws and what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, I mean, look, they have said they're still going to keep general draws. They've kept them. Like there's a general draw on June 8th. It was general, no
Right.
specification. The targeted, like the occupation category based draw just happened last week. We have to just wait and see
Yeah.
how often they're going to happen. Is it going to be 1 week targeted, 1 week general? Like we have no clue. And that's why I said it's very hard for us to give this advice now because there is no trends to base things on. We're living live these changes, these updates, which are crazy because it comes down to, okay, well, I do have 500 points, but I'm a chef. Am I going to get invited for PR?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? We'll have to wait and see, but you're very competitive in your score.
Perfect. So that's one thing I think that everybody needs to keep in mind that you need to hold your guns. If they are saying they'll take out general draws, so let's wait for that time to come in where the general draw happens. And if you're above the score, that's the way to go. But what do these guys do then, Sonia? What is the alternative that you suggest when they come to us, when they come to Green and Spiegel? What do you suggest? What do they do? Do they go for PNP? Because that again is collected to express entry, right? So that doesn't change. Even the provinces are going to take the way the federal draws are going. So, what do you suggest to these people then?
I mean, like, look, PNP is not always connected to Express Entry. There are programs that are not connected to Express Entry. So PNPs are power to give into the provinces to get their workforce, their labor needs that they need. So say if there is non-STEM workers needed in British Columbia, they're still
Right.
going to do draws for non-STEM workers, and they're still going to continue to do them, even if there's no express entry draws and it's a non-express entry based PNP, which will still happen. The downfall of those, they do take longer to get PR, but they're there, right? It's going to be interesting how the PNP programs play in with this express entry, because really what express entry, these category-based draws have done is they've taken that market that the PNPs used to do. So it's going to be interesting. Like, is PNP going to shake up and introduce new programs? And that, like I said, we're live. We'll see how this plays out. But for people that are in the pool, they have a good score, stick in there. Jumping to PNP is not as easy as everybody thinks, because with a lot of PNP programs, you need to have a job offer in Canada, where express entry, you
Right.
don't. So if these people have
Right.
the option of getting a job offer, they shouldn't even be waiting for an express entry draw. Maybe they should get themselves on the path of, hey, we have a job offer. Let's get a work permit. Let's get to Canada. Let's play it out how it happens.
Right. So that's going to be quite interesting to see how it's going to be very interesting to see how this works. But there's still hope, as I would say to everybody. And other than that, Sonia, let's talk about at today's agenda. Let's talk about work permits. Let's talk about the PNPs and the work permits and how they are linked. You're very well aware of how things work in India, right?
Yeah.
There is this concept of getting an LMIA. You pay XYZ amount.
Yeah.
One of a kind. Sorry, using the word. One of my peers and friends, maybe sitting in British Columbia, maybe Ontario, says, "Hey, I'm going to charge you XYZ. Here's the document," and then you file it out, and then God knows what happens, and people get trapped.
Mhm.
Now, with that process, I want you to definitely highlight, on the LMIs, that the legal and the illegal bit. I definitely want you to talk about it a bit, that how they can impact everybody's profile.
Yeah. Look, we don't want to sit in a position where we just rely on someone else to do something. That is when trouble arises, right? Knowledge is power,
Right.
and take that knowledge and go from there. Basically, if someone is charging you an exorbitant amount and saying, hey, I have someone that's going to do an LMIA and do it for you, well, you shouldn't be paying to get a job. That's not how the industry works, right? If I wanted a job as a lawyer, I shouldn't be paying Green and Spiegel to hire me. That's your first red flag. If you're paying a company to hire you, that's a problem, right? So as soon as that happens, and we see like some crazy amounts, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, like that's ridiculous, right? Like, right off the bat, you should know, hey, something is off, right? Do your due diligence. A lot of the companies are registered. You can find them online through database systems to see if these companies even exist. Is it a shell company? Are they actually operating? Do not fall in these traps. I know everybody is always in this situation of, we want to leave. We want to leave India. We want to do this. But the thing is, if you take one wrong step, it could actually mess up everything going forward. It's better to lay the foundation down properly before you build your house of immigration, because you don't want that house to fall down because you didn't do your due diligence and make sure the foundation you were laying was correct.
Right, of course, and I think that's the major challenge which everybody comes down into. Yeah. Coming to the second part, Sonia, I want to talk about specifically, let's say, self-employed stream. I have lots of sportsmen today. They don't speak English, most of them, but they do understand what we're chatting about, and they have joined in as well. And I was chatting with the Sonia guys, and we were discussing about self-employed stream. Now, generally speaking, I'm not even going into particulars. What scope with somebody who has, I'm just taking an example with sportsmen who have won medals at national level, at state level, played rigorously between 2018-23, and now are coaching as well and playing. Some of them are enrolled with the government departments. They get trapped with this LMIA business because those guys say, hey, pay us 40,000 and we'll get you into Canada. Whereas most of them that I see, depends of course on profile once you give a go ahead, but most of them, with the achievements that they have as sportsmen and playing at nationals, at states, winning championships, police championships, etc., gold medalists, would somehow be eligible for self-employed. What do you suggest to them when they come to paying this money, instead of going the easy way.
Yeah, like, be very careful of LMIAs, especially if you're paying $40,000, right? Look, you guys have programs open to you. Like, first do your due diligence, see if there's anything else open to you, right? We always think, and this is a very Indian, I'm Indian, it's very quickly, do it. What's the fastest way? I just want to get there. After that, I'll kick around and figure it out. Somehow something will happen. But that's the word. That was Canada immigration when my parents immigrated. They would come here as visitors and they would figure it out. That doesn't happen nowadays, right? Like, you have to be very systematic in the way you process things. It's not, hey, chale jao, and then figure out what happens, right?
Yes, you'll figure out what needs to be done.
Yeah, so don't do that. But like for self-employed, like for athletes, if you guys are competing at this world-class level and you're self-employed, there's a program made specially for you guys. It's like literally your program. It's for cultural and athletic groups, right? Because the Canadian government does realize that these athletes don't fall under the typical express entry route or, working in Canada, because most of these athletes are self-employed, right? They're not running and working for organizations. They're working for themselves and getting paid as Sonia, the athlete, right? If you have been doing this for at least 2 years in the last 5 years, you're qualified. Right. So and then it depends on the better your level. And I always say it's like this. It's going to a job interview with this kind of program. You are selling yourself of how great you are. And that is like this whole program is subjective. It's not like, hey, if you provide X, Y, and Z, you're going. It's, hey, tell me why you're so great. So present yourself. When we do this application, we really push for documents, and, it can get annoying and it can be like, hey, already provided enough, but it's at the end of the day, Sonia's here in Canada. She doesn't need these documents, right? I'm pushing them for you guys to say, hey, you need to sell yourself stronger. You and I have a relationship. We're talking. I figure out how you are, but the government's only looking at the documents. They're not talking to you. They're not getting it's everything that's on the paper in front of them. So sell yourself in the best possible way through paperwork.
Yeah, and why I brought this up, Sonia, because a lot of listeners are today from Haryana and Punjab, and people are sportsmen in these states. Most of my friends, viewers, and I was shocked when I met some of them a couple of days back. They have 7, 8 medals, golds, and silvers, and they've won national championships. And I'm like, why are you ending up paying some guy who doesn't know where his head is $40,000, where the same thing we are doing as professionals? So my whole thing was that, third thing, Sonia, let's talk about express entry. People are always scared. What if, or self-employed? Let's talk about that. What if while doing this, I get rejected? What happens there? Is there an appellate process? What is the reason for rejection in self-employed?
I mean, look, subjective. It's a very subjective application, right? So you're going to probably get refused if you get refused because you didn't sell yourself strong enough. Okay. I also tell people this: once you've submitted your file, continue to update. Don't just stop there, because you're allowed to update your file. So if you win another medal, or if you ended up competing at the Olympics, right? Update your file. Even competing at the Olympics is fine. You don't have to make the podium. Anything you do that can show that, hey, you know what, you're progressing, you do that. There are appeal processes, but usually when it comes down to decisions, we take a look at, hey, why did the officer make this decision? If better documents were provided, would they have made a different decision? And if that point it makes sense to resubmit, it would be better to resubmit than appeal and go to federal courts and appeal things.
Yeah, of course, because when it comes to provincial, when it comes to districts or so-called readings, when it comes to national level, India is a much bigger country with so many people competing and achieving, 3 times, 4 times medals. There are 21-year-olds who've joined today who have 5 consecutive national golds, and they're just 21 years of age. So for them as well, this is what मैं आप सभी को यही बोलना चाहूंगा कि जितने स्पोर्ट्समैन आज जुड़े हैं, कि आप सब जो सोनिया कह रही हैं, because she is the expert, जितनी ज्यादा डॉक्यूमेंट्स आप प्रोवाइड करेंगे, उतना ज्यादा ये स्ट्रीमलाइन होगा प्रोसेस. Sonia, coming to express entry and PNP.
Sorry, I'm going to just add in. I would just want to add in there. For a lot of self-employed, what we know is you guys don't keep your documents in check.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So build your profile now. You're young still, you're starting, get your documents in line. Anytime you win something, print it off, put it into a folder. Social media is your friend. You guys are of that age where you use social media. The more the presence, the better. Outline any website articles, anything, print them off, save them, put them in a cloud. Because if you're going to say, okay, yeah, I got them in a year's time, I'm going to apply, you're going to miss so many things going backwards. Just do it right away, save it into a folder, and keep your documents up to par.
No, and rightly said. आप जो सोनी आपसे कहना चाह रही हैं वो है कि आप जितनी ज़्यादा डॉक्यूमेंट्स प्रोवाइड करेंगे, उनको क्रिएट करेंगे, उनकी एक chronological history बनाएंगे, that's going to help you way more in processing. Sonia, let's talk also about an interesting aspect. There are coaches. I'm quite shocked to see there are referees and coaches who have represented India non-stop at international level. Forget the Olympics, but I mean is international games happening, national games happening across. They also have been asking this question. Last when I interacted with Stephen on the live, that are we also part of the journey? Are we also eligible as self-employed because we have represented India and we have been working with the government of India, which is at the state level, at the center level, and pursuing being part of the boxing federation. I mean, I remember we did one celebrity trainer amongst us, but I got to know there is a boy who's 32 years old and he's training 60 athletes competing at World Police Games and so forth, so on. And they were being told again to pay $40,000, $50,000. So these kind of people who are training international athletes, but on their own accord, medal winners, are they also someone who can look up to this program?
It's very difficult for coaches and non-athletes because they're actually not the ones competing, right? They're not doing the athletic event. It's really hard for them to say under this program unless there is some cultural activity twist you can put to it. But it becomes very difficult. Since they're coaches, they're actually employed. They get paid being employed. Even if it's self-employed through a company, they can still take advantage of express entry. Right. So there's still programs for them, but self-employed really, I would say, cater it towards the actual athletes. Right. And even beyond athletes, when we talk cultural activities, it can be like producers, anything media, anything like musical, like anything world renowned. Like you think of it, most artists are self-employed. Right. So you don't want to take that away from them becoming PRs of Canada because they're not fitting a box of express entry or something. Right. You think of those when you do self-employed. When it comes to coaches or, like personnel, like trainers and stuff like internally, those would be more in terms of like the express entries or job offers.
Yeah. And, some of these guys who are trainers, they're like training about on their own. They're not working with the government. Some of them are training on their own or coaching, international athletes in India, like who are partaking in different international programs. What about those people? They, of course, I believe, shouldn't have a problem because they're doing their own business rather than being employed as working somewhere.
So with even express entries, and people always forget this, you can be self-employed overseas and still be qualified as employed for express entry. So for them, the best thing is always having that employment because they are employed. They're employed as coaches, even if it's a self-employed company, because they're not athletic themselves. And you know what? They might be old athletes. So if they are getting back into it while they're coaching, they're also athletes themselves. That's different, right? But if they were athletes 10, 15 years ago and now they're strictly coaching, then I would say stick to a different program.
Okay, perfect. So that was on the sports part. Last of the comments when we talk about express entry again. What is your last suggestion before we sign off for express entry going forward? What do you suggest to people as generally when they're preparing their profile? What should they watch out for? Some of the pointers, because people have created profiles. They're just waiting randomly, as you said at the beginning. But any last thoughts you want to put across for people?
Look, if your language scores aren't perfect, try to make them better. Do the online exams, prep for them. For Indian nationals, don't try to avoid doing the CELPIP because you were raised in the British Council system. So the IELTS is a better exam for you to write. But if you see you're staggering at the that score, you can try the CELPIPs online. They're free of charge to do a free test and see how you score. So if you score higher, do that. try to find the jobs. Don't sit idle. If you do have a pre-calculation, your score is high, just put yourself into the pool. Let it ride. It doesn't cost you anything to enter the pool. Let it ride, because sometimes we don't know, the scores may drop, right? And if they
Right.
drop and you weren't in the pool, you would not be selected.
So language is one of the things for everybody today on this live join with us, that kindly focus on the language part of things, because they will really help you in getting your scores up. I remember when I did my express entry, I had to score a very high in IELTS, rather, even after, and I made it because it was IELTS that got me through towards the end of things. So everybody today here, please keep your IELTS score high. And anyone wanting to ask a question, please type in the chat box. Otherwise, Sonia, after a minute, we'll be signing off. Thank you for interacting with you, and
Thank you.
we look forward to more interactions, having you more to do these discussions.
Yes, anytime.
आप में से किसी का कोई सवाल है तो मुझे आप टेक्स्ट कर सकते हैं या चैट बॉक्स में लिख सकते हैं। मैं सोनिया से पूछ सकता हूं, अदरवाइज वो हमारे साथ फिर जुड़ेंगी अगले हफ्ते। एक टारगेट स्पेसिफिक के साथ हम सेशन करेंगे, उसमें भी पूछ सकते हैं सवाल। All right, Sonia, thank you so much.
Okay.
I think I will get the questions. I'll share those with you. But lovely having
No
you here.
worries.
Have a great week. Bye-bye. Hope to see you soon
Thank
again. You have a great
you.
day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.